The stage was narrow, the lighting flickered, and the audience was a scattering of faces in a cavernous, half-empty hall. It was 2013 in Seoul. 7 young men stood in a line, waiting for a signal that felt like it might never come. Behind them, the company was hollowed out by debt, hovering on the edge of total collapse. There were no massive marketing campaigns, no industry heavyweights to open doors, and no safety net if they failed. They stood in the harsh glare of the spotlights, feeling the weight of a future that looked more like a dead end than a beginning. Every movement was measured, every breath held in the quiet tension of the room. They were 7 individuals cast into an industry that had already decided they did not belong. The silence from the crowd was not just indifference, it was a wall. They looked at each other, gauging the resolve in the eyes of their counterparts. The music started, a thin sound in a space that demanded something much larger. They moved in unison, pushing against the emptiness. The rejection was not always loud. Often it was just a turn back in a broadcast hallway or a door closing before they could even finish their introduction. Staff looked past them, eyes already searching for the next established group. Critics in the industry columns were sharper, dismissing their origins, with a few typed lines that echoed the same verdict. They were an anomaly that would vanish by winter. The members retreated from the cold indifference of the studios to a small, humid room. The air in there was thick, heavy with the scent of sweat and the constant, rhythmic thud of feet against floorboards. They did not talk about the critics. They did not talk about the empty bank accounts. Instead, they turned the pressure inward. They spent nights hunched over notebooks, scratching out lines about the weight of societal expectations and the creeping fear of failure. They were writing their own reality, pulling the words from the exhaustion of their muscles and the frustration of their silence. Every syllable was a reaction to the world that refused to see them. The room was small, but the ambition was starting to take up all the space. The breakthrough did not happen in a boardroom. It happened on a screen. A single, grainy video of a performance was uploaded to a forum, then shared to a blog, then pushed into the feeds of strangers. It moved without permission, bypassing the gatekeepers who had turned them away. A fan in one country clicked play, watched the choreography, and stopped to read the subtitles. They saw the lyrics about the weight of expectations and the fear of the future. They hit translate. Then they hit share. The video jumped borders, landing in living rooms and bedrooms across continents. Suddenly, the silence of the broadcast stations was replaced by the noise of a growing digital network. People who had never met began to talk about the same verses. They recognized the frustration in the rhythm and the honesty in the delivery. It was no longer just a performance. It was a mirror. A listener in a distant city felt the same pressure, the same uncertainty, and the same drive to keep moving. The barrier between the stage and the audience dissolved. With every click, every translation, and every shared link, the reach expanded. What started as a small, local effort in a humid room had become a global fire. The world was beginning to listen. The digital ripple became a tidal wave. With the release of the Wings album, the numbers stopped being just data points and started becoming a threat to the status quo. The industry had spent years ignoring them, but now the charts were shifting. Every play, every stream, and every physical unit sold was a direct challenge to the old guard. When DNA dropped, the barrier shattered completely. It was no longer a niche phenomenon. It was a cultural takeover. Executives who had once turned their backs now scrambled to understand the mechanics of a movement they had failed to predict. They looked at the metrics and saw a reality they could not control. The fans were not just listeners. They were a coordinated global force. The traditional gatekeepers realized the rules of the game had changed. They tried to categorize the sound, but the momentum was too fast to contain. The industry was forced to watch as the old structures crumbled under the weight of a new reality. There was no going back. The shift was absolute. The silence of the past had been replaced by a roar that could be heard in every corner. The climb was now a demonstration of total, undeniable power. The shift from digital disruption to global dominance happened in a single, calculated strike. When the track Dynamite hit the airwaves, it did not just climb the charts. It broke the ceiling. For the first time in history, a Korean act sat at the #1 spot on the Billboard Hot 100. The data was undeniable. The industry, which had once dismissed them as an anomaly, now watched as the song dominated radio play and streaming platforms simultaneously. This was not a fluke. It was a demonstration of reach. The momentum spilled out of the speakers and into the real world. Stadiums in London, Paris, and Los Angeles opened their gates, and within minutes, every seat was claimed. The logistics of the tours became a massive, coordinated operation. Thousands of fans converged on city centers, turning streets into hubs of activity. Inside the venues, the scale of the production matched the size of the crowd. They were no longer just a group of artists. They were a global entity that commanded the attention of millions. The transition from the small, humid practice room to the center of a sold-out stadium was complete. They stood on these massive stages, looking out at a sea of people that stretched beyond the reach of the spotlights. The climb had led them to the summit, and from this height the entire world was watching their next move. The stage grew larger than any stadium. They walked into the United Nations, not as performers, but as representatives of a new era. The shift was absolute. They stood before world leaders, delivering messages that echoed across borders, proving that their reach moved far beyond the limits of melody and rhythm. Critics who had once mocked their origins now watched as they earned Grammy nominations, a formal validation that shattered the final barriers of the industry. Language was no longer a wall. It was a bridge. At the heart of this expansion was the army. They were not just a collection of fans. They operated with the precision of a global network. They coordinated across time zones, organized digital campaigns, and amplified the group's message with a speed that traditional media could not match. Every nomination and every diplomatic appearance was backed by this massive, synchronized force. The group had built a structure that functioned like a sovereign entity, independent of the old gatekeepers. They had turned their music into a language that millions spoke, and their influence into a tool for global change. The world watched as they navigated these high-stakes environments, proving that their impact was a permanent shift. In 2022, the momentum reached a point where the world expected nothing but more. The tour schedules were locked, the recording sessions were continuous, and the global reach was at an all-time high. Then, the announcement arrived. It was not a gradual decline, it was a hard stop. The members declared a formal hiatus to pursue individual projects and fulfill their mandatory military service. The news hit the industry like a seismic shift. The massive, synchronized machine that had operated for nearly a decade suddenly powered down. The stadium lights dimmed. The recording studios went quiet. The travel schedules that had spanned continents for years were wiped clean. For the millions who had tracked every release and every tour date, the silence was immediate and absolute. The music stopped, and for the first time in years, the world was left to process the sheer scale of what had just been put on hold. The silence that followed was not an absence. It was a space. Critics initially labeled the hiatus as a potential end, but the reality proved far more calculated. The members moved into their mandatory service, trading the glare of stadium lights for the discipline of the barracks. This was not a collapse of the structure they had built, but a necessary pivot. The global machine, once fueled by constant output, entered a period of reflection. For the millions who had followed their climb from the bottom, the pause provided a chance to measure the scale of what had been achieved. They had spent 10 years defining a new standard for global influence, and now the world watched as they stepped back to fulfill their duties. The industry shifted its focus, waiting for the next move, but the members remained disciplined in their separation. This hiatus acted as a filter, separating the fleeting trends from the substance of their work. As they completed their service, the narrative changed. The pause became a testament to their endurance. The final months of service are ticking away. The barracks are quiet, but the world outside is beginning to stir. Across every continent, the fan network is recalibrating, organizing with the same precision that once propelled their songs to the top of the charts. This is not a slow fade back into the light. It is a calculated, synchronized return. The industry is watching the calendar. Every member is completing their duty, moving from the structure of service back toward the creative freedom of the studio. The stage is being cleared. The lights are being tested. The silence that defined the last 2 years is thinning, replaced by a low, constant hum of anticipation. They proved that power does not need to be inherited. It is built through the persistence of a single, unshakable voice. Now, that voice is preparing to speak again. The reunion is no longer a distant possibility. It is a logistical certainty. The global infrastructure they built remains intact, waiting for the signal to restart. The members are emerging from their time apart, ready to reclaim the space they carved out for themselves. The legacy they established is not just a record of the past, but a foundation for what comes next. The world is holding its breath. The countdown has begun. The stage is set. Are you ready for the return of BTS?